You are checking out online, buying a $60 pair of shoes, and there it is, or 4 interest-free payments of $15. No credit check mentioned, no interest mentioned. Feels almost like a discount. Millions of Americans have clicked that button without thinking twice, and a growing number of them are now finding out the hard way that this quiet little checkout button has quietly become one of the fastest growing debt traps in the country. And it is only just now starting to show up on their credit reports. Buy now, pay later. The industry term for services like Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, and PayPal's version of the same thing exploded during the pandemic and has not slowed down since. A 2024 report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York found that BNPL usage among American consumers has grown dramatically year over year, with adoption particularly concentrated among younger consumers and, notably, among people who already have lower credit scores or limited access to traditional credit cards. That last detail matters enormously, and we will come back to it because it is the key to understanding who this product actually targets. Here is the pitch, and on the surface, it sounds genuinely reasonable. Split a purchase into 4 equal payments, usually every 2 weeks, with 0 interest charged if you pay on time. Compare that to a credit card, where carrying a balance can rack up interest north of 20% annually, and BNPL looks like the obviously smarter choice. For someone who pays every installment exactly on schedule, it genuinely can be. That is not the part hiding the problem. The problem is what happens when you do not pay on time. And more importantly, what happens when you are using 5 of these apps at once without realizing how much you have actually committed to. Let's start with the fees. Late payment penalties on BNPL services can range anywhere from $7 flat fees up to a percentage of the missed payment, and some services will charge that penalty again if the payment remains unpaid after a certain window. Because these payments are automatically scheduled every 2 weeks. Missing one because your paycheck timing shifted, or because you simply forgot which of your 5 different BNPL apps has a payment due this particular Thursday, has become a genuinely common occurrence. A 2023 survey from Consumer Reports found that nearly half of BNPL users had missed at least one payment, and among those, a significant portion reported being charged late fees as a result. Now here is where it becomes something closer to an actual debt spiral rather than a minor inconvenience. Researchers have documented something called loan stacking, where a single consumer uses multiple different BNPL apps simultaneously, each unaware of the others. Because until very recently, these purchases were not reported to traditional credit bureaus at all. This meant a lender, or even the BNPL company itself, had no way of knowing that the person applying for their 4th simultaneous pay in 4 inches plan already had 3 other active BNPL commitments draining their next several paychecks. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau specifically flagged this invisible stacking risk as one of the core dangers of the product in their formal 2022 report on the BNPL industry, warning that consumers were accumulating debt loads that simply did not show up anywhere a responsible lender would normally check. This invisibility is not an accident of how the technology happened to develop. It is the actual business model. Because BNPL loans historically were not reported to credit bureaus, they existed in a regulatory gray area, technically functioning like loans, but not required to follow the same disclosure and underwriting rules that credit cards and personal loans have followed for decades. This meant BNPL companies could approve people almost instantly, with minimal or no credit check, specifically because the loan amounts per transaction were small enough to avoid triggering the same regulatory scrutiny. Approve fast, keep the loan small, repeat as many times as the customer allows. Here is the current affairs part of this story, and it is genuinely moving right now, not settled history. In 2024, FICO, the same company controlling the credit score formula from earlier in this series, announced it would begin incorporating BNPL data into certain versions of its credit scoring models. Around the same time, Equifax, one of the 3 major credit bureaus, announced it would start allowing BNPL providers to report this data. This is a massive shift. For years, BNPL purchases essentially did not exist in the eyes of the traditional credit system. That is now actively changing, which means millions of Americans who have been using these apps casually, assuming there were no long-term consequences because nothing showed up on my credit report, are about to discover that their BNPL history is becoming visible in exactly the system they thought it was invisible to. This cuts both ways, and it is worth being honest about that. For someone who has used BNPL responsibly, paying every installment on time, this new reporting could actually help build credit history, particularly for younger consumers or those without traditional credit cards, which connects directly back to the credit invisible problem covered earlier in this series. But for the substantial number of users who have been stacking multiple plans and occasionally missing payments, assuming there was no real downside beyond a small late fee, this shift means those missed payments could soon start showing up as marks against their actual credit score, the same score determining their future mortgage rates, their car loan terms, and their apartment applications. Now let's talk about who is actually using this the most, because the demographic data reveals something important about why this specific product exploded the way it did. Research from the Federal Reserve found that BNPL users skew younger and are disproportionately likely to already be financially vulnerable, meaning they are more likely to also be carrying credit card debt, more likely to have subprime credit scores, and more likely to be using BNPL specifically to cover essential purchases like groceries, not just discretionary shopping. That last point deserves emphasis. A meaningful and growing share of BNPL usage is not for the occasional pair of shoes. Multiple surveys, including one from LendingTree, found a significant percentage of users had used BNPL specifically to pay for basic necessities, essentially using an installment loan to cover groceries because their paycheck was not stretching far enough on its own. That detail reframes the entire product. This is not primarily a story about impulsive shopping decisions. For a meaningful portion of users, BNPL has quietly become a substitute for the emergency financial cushion many Americans do not have, a way of pushing an unavoidable expense 2, 4, 6 weeks into the future in an economy where wages have not kept pace with the cost of living discussed earlier in this series. It works exactly like a payday loan in that specific function, just with better branding and a far more pleasant checkout experience. Here is what actually matters for you, practically, given all of this. If you are currently using any BNPL service, checking whether that specific provider has started reporting to credit bureaus is now a genuinely important step, not a paranoid one, because the answer determines whether a missed payment is a minor inconvenience or an actual mark on your credit history going forward. Tracking every active BNPL plan across every app in one place matters more than it used to, specifically because loan stacking is the exact mechanism that turns several individually manageable payments into a collectively unmanageable one, especially once several $15 payments across 5 different apps all happen to land in the same week. And treating a BNPL interest-free label as fundamentally different from debt, rather than simply a different form of it, is the mental shift that actually protects you, because the interest-free framing is precisely what makes it feel psychologically safer than a credit card, even when a missed payment carries real financial consequences. The checkout button that says 4 easy payments was designed by people who understand consumer psychology extremely well, and it was designed during a specific window when almost none of it showed up anywhere that could affect your financial future. That window is closing right now, in real time, and a lot of people are about to find out exactly how much debt they were quietly carrying the moment it finally becomes visible.